I always thought Loretta's baby talk was just that talk, little jabs wrapped in sugar. That second bedroom would make the perfect nursery. Or I saw this book of baby names and thought of you. She had a way of slipping things into my life like they belonged. Pink tulip-printed bibs tucked inside Christmas stockings, fertility tea bags left beside the kettle, a framed quote about grandchildren that somehow ended up on our mantle. Harmless things, or so I told myself. But over the past few weeks, something in me felt off. My cycle was erratic. I was nauseous every morning. My emotions jumped without warning, tears at commercials snapping at Noah for breathing too loud. I blamed it on work stress, maybe burnout, maybe perimenopause, even though I was barely 31. Then one Tuesday during lunch, I reached for my multivitamin bottle in front of Corey, a design associate and former ER nurse. She tilted her head and asked, "Where'd you get this?" "Loretta," I said casually. She brought it over with some bone broth and essential oils. Corey frowned, reading the label. "Soraya, this isn't a multivitamin. It's clomiphene. It's for stimulating ovulation, usually in fertility treatments." I laughed at first, thinking she was joking. But when I searched the name on my phone, the screen confirmed it. My stomach twisted. I hadn't stopped taking my birth control, hadn't switched prescriptions, hadn't asked for anything. When I got home that night, I dumped the bathroom trash onto the floor. Beneath tissues and floss picks were torn foil packets, empty clomiphene blister sheets. I'd never seen them before, never touched them. They were stuffed into the bin like a guilty secret. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, breathing through the rising panic, and then pulled out my laptop. The next morning, before Loretta came by with her cheery knock and lavender lotion, I installed a motion-activated camera behind the spice rack in the kitchen. It was discreet, silent, and angled perfectly toward the drawer where she liked to tidy up my supplements. I didn't scream, I didn't confront, I just waited, and smiled when I handed her the coffee mug that said, "Best grandma ever." The next morning, I made sure the kitchen was spotless, the way Loretta liked it, except for one small detail. I left the vitamin bottle just slightly askew on the counter, half unscrewed like a careless mistake. A quiet invitation. She came by exactly at 8:40, humming as she let herself in, with the key she never asked permission to keep. "Good morning, my darling girl," she called, voice thick with warmth that always felt a few degrees too sweet. "I brought a new tea raspberry leaf, excellent for uterine health." I smiled and thanked her like I always did, like I didn't know what she was doing. While I made coffee, she offered to organize the wellness drawer. I nodded and turned away, listening to the soft shuffle of bottles and foil in the background. The camera light blinked once invisible, unless you knew where to look. At dinner that evening, Noah grilled salmon while Loretta poured wine, none for me, of course, just in case, she said with a wink. Then she leaned over and rubbed my shoulder gently. "You'll be such a beautiful mother, sweetheart. I can feel it. Soon." I looked at Noah, who just smiled, oblivious, and I forced a small laugh. "We'll see," I said, keeping my voice even. Loretta beamed like I'd said yes to something, as if she were the one I needed to convince. Good mothers have an aura. She continued, eyes fixed on me, a softness, a glow. "You're blooming, Soraya, you really are." My stomach twisted, but I held the smile. "That's sweet of you to say." That night, I exported the day's footage and saved it to an external drive, then backed it up to a cloud folder Quinn didn't even know existed. I labeled the file Morning Routine, Loretta. Then I made tea with the raspberry leaf she'd brought and poured it down the sink. The next time Loretta came over, she handed me a crisp white envelope. "I booked you a consultation," she said, almost breathless, "just to explore your options. It started with a fabric store." Loretta said she needed help choosing a new pattern for cushion covers, so I agreed to tag along on a slow Saturday. On the way back, she suggested we stop by a wellness clinic she'd read about in a women's journal. "Just a peek," she said. "No pressure." The building looked like it belonged in a catalog, sleek, sterile, quietly expensive. Inside, the receptionist greeted Loretta by name. That was the first red flag. The second came moments later when a nurse called my name, clipboard in hand. "I'm just here with my mother-in-law," I said politely. "We didn't have an appointment." The nurse smiled too brightly. "Oh, I think there's been a little surprise planned. Your file's already set up. Dr. Geller is looking forward to meeting you." Before I could protest, Loretta placed a hand on my back and gave a gentle push. "Just a conversation, sweetheart. You can walk right out if it's not for you." Dr. Geller's office was modern and minimalist, with shelves lined in books about fertility, surrogacy, hormone balancing. He didn't waste time. "It's wonderful you're here, Soraya. Your mother-in-law speaks so highly of you. We've already reviewed your medical background. Everything looks optimal." My lips parted, but I said nothing. Instead, I smiled and nodded. "That's great." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a full fertility assessment packet, already labeled with my name and insurance. The handwriting on the intake form looked eerily similar to mine, but not quite. "We believe in proactive family planning," he continued. "And you're at a golden age window. With a little nudge, you could help build something truly beautiful." I took the packet, held it gently, and thanked him. That night, I scanned every page and sent it all to Quinn with a brief note. How many laws did this break? The next day, Loretta showed up with tulips and prenatal vitamins wrapped in a bow. It was supposed to be brunch. Loretta said she wanted a simple get-together with Noah's extended family. Mimosas, pastries, maybe a backyard catch-up. I brought a neutral-toned pie dish and wore a navy blouse I didn't mind spilling things on. When I walked through the front door, I froze. The living room was soaked in pastel pinks and mints, streamers, floral centerpieces, little paper signs that read, "Bump ahead and ready to pop." A table in the corner held wrapped gifts, and a banner above the fireplace read, "Congratulations, Soraya." People clapped. Someone squealed. Someone else snapped a photo. I didn't move. Loretta floated into view, beaming with pride. "Isn't it beautiful?" she said, kissing my cheek. "Soraya is preparing for motherhood, and I wanted her to feel how loved she is." Surprise cousins I hadn't seen in years came up to hug me. A woman I didn't recognize handed me a diaper cake. "We heard you're exploring fertility options. Such a beautiful step." Noah stood near the kitchen, blinking like he'd walked into someone else's dream. I caught his eyes and gave him a tiny shake of my head. He looked away, unsure. I laughed softly. Tight, polite, the kind you use when someone makes a toast at the wrong wedding. "This is so thoughtful," I said, careful with each word. "Really unexpected." Loretta squeezed my arm. "She's modest, but we're so proud. This journey is going to be incredible." I didn't correct her. I didn't scream. I let her believe the story she was so desperate to tell. Later, while guests cooed over handmade onesies and gifted me prenatal yoga gift cards, I slipped into the hallway and turned on my phone's voice recorder. I got clear audio of Loretta explaining to an aunt how she gently nudged Soraya into the right mindset. "She just needed direction," she said sweetly. "Sometimes we have to guide the ones we love." When I got home, I uploaded the recording, labeled it, and filed it beside the footage from the clinic. Quinn didn't say anything for a full minute after reviewing the documents I sent. Then she asked if I could meet her in person. At her office, she had already pulled up a spreadsheet of complaints linked to the clinic Blessed Grove Wellness Center. Most of them had gone nowhere marked unsubstantiated or patient non-compliant, but the patterns were there if you knew what to look for. The women were mostly in their early 20s. Many were Latina. Some didn't speak fluent English. A few were from conservative households or had religious upbringings. All of them described supportive family members who arranged their appointments, filled out forms, and sometimes signed on their behalf. One name kept surfacing: Loretta Delgado. She'd listed herself as an emergency contact or family liaison on at least 6 different records. One of them included a young woman from El Paso who said she thought she was applying for a nutrition program. Another said she didn't realize she'd signed a release for egg harvesting until a nurse mentioned retrieval prep. Quinn leaned back in her chair, shaking her head. "This isn't just creepy," she said. "It's organized, systemic, and your footage might be the missing link." I stared at the monitor at Loretta's name again and again, sitting quietly beside words like guardian, trusted reference, maternal counsel. At home, I began drafting anonymous emails. I used a burner address and set up encrypted channels. I contacted 3 women who had commented on a forum post about the clinic's ethics. I explained what happened to me in part and asked if they'd be willing to share their story confidentially. 2 replied within the hour. That night, while Noah watched TV downstairs, I sat in our bedroom sorting audio files and time-stamped video clips. Each one was a thread, a warning, a piece of something bigger than I'd let myself admit. I saved everything to a hidden drive labeled Blueprints, because that's what this had become. A design, not just to protect myself, but to expose the structure she'd spent years perfecting. I spent 3 nights editing the footage. I kept the tone calm, the transitions clean, no narration, just the facts. The moment Loretta slipped a pill bottle into her handbag and replaced it with another, the slow pan of pink streamers and congratulations signs from the brunch, the doctor at the clinic smiling as he slid me paperwork with my name already filled in. I blurred faces where I could mask voices where I needed to, but I left Loretta's name untouched in the prescription label shots and the clinic's intake forms. I ended the video with a single black screen and white text. How many women are being guided into motherhood without ever consenting to the journey? I uploaded it anonymously to a subreddit focused on reproductive autonomy and coercion. I didn't link it to myself. I didn't respond to the comments. I just watched the post take off. Within 24 hours, it had over 10,000 upvotes and hundreds of comments. People called it chilling, horrifying, all too familiar. Some shared their own stories. A few recognized the clinic and said they'd had strange experiences there too. One commenter said, "That brunch footage is what finally broke me. That wasn't support. That was a staged fantasy." At home, Loretta grew jittery. She spent hours on her phone pacing, snapping at Noah for leaving crumbs on the counter or not answering texts fast enough. She brought me a tin of magnesium chews and a new journal with "Mama in the Making" embossed on the cover. When I didn't react, she smiled too widely. "You've been moody, sweetheart. Are your hormones acting up again? Maybe it's the stress. Or maybe you're just scared of being happy." I looked at her and nodded once. "Could be," I said, voice flat. She started watching me more closely after that, hovering in the kitchen, offering to help with laundry, asking odd questions like whether I'd talk to anyone about how I'm feeling, but I kept my tone gentle, my posture open, my expression blank. The calmer I stayed, the louder she scrambled. And then the envelope arrived, thin, official, stamped with county court seals. The envelope was thin, but the words inside carried the weight of a sledgehammer. Petition for temporary conservatorship, filed by Loretta Delgado. Claim reproductive psychosis and emotional instability due to unresolved fertility grief. I read it once, then again. Her language was clinical, detached, rehearsed. She had highlighted my erratic behavior, referenced my withdrawal from family support, and claimed I exhibited symptoms of denial rooted in maternal identity displacement. It read like a psychiatric profile built from Google searches and manipulation. Attached to the petition was a letter signed by Dr. Geller, the same man from the clinic supporting Loretta's claim. He stated I refused to engage in standard fertility interventions despite optimal conditions, and supportive care calling my resistance a warning sign of deeper cognitive dissonance. Noah found the petition on the kitchen counter when he came home that night. His eyes scanned the words, then flicked up to me. "Is this a joke?" he asked, half hopeful. I didn't answer. Loretta had already been working on him, I could tell. He showed me proof journal pages she'd copied and highlighted old text messages pulled out of context, a voicemail where I cried after a failed work presentation and said I feel broken. She framed it all as evidence of my unraveling. "She's worried about you," Noah said gently, as if I were glass. "She just wants what's best." I sat across from him in silence, watching the man I loved struggle to hold two truths that didn't coexist. I didn't argue. I didn't try to convince him. I'd already sent the documents to Quinn. I'd already pulled copies of the footage onto 3 drives and printed transcripts of Loretta's brunch speeches and clinic conversations. I knew what this was. It wasn't about concern or care. It was about control, and she was trying to take it legally. The hearing date was set for 2 weeks out. Enough time to build a wall of evidence brick by brick. Enough time to turn the lens from me to her. And just enough time to remind her that I wasn't the one unraveling. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Neutral carpeting, polished wood, everything sterile and polite except the tension. Loretta sat at the petitioner's table in a soft gray suit, hands folded like a benevolent mother awaiting praise. Her attorney, a woman with the sharpness of a blade hidden in a silk ribbon, opened with a statement that sounded almost like a eulogy. Soraya Kettering, she said, is a highly intelligent, deeply traumatized woman who has suffered an internal fracture brought on by years of career-centric living and untreated fertility grief. She described me like a cautionary tale detached from nature, unable to bond, consumed by her own ambition. She used words like delusion, denial, and emotional fugue. I sat still, listening to her shape my life into something unrecognizable. Then Quinn stood. She didn't posture or project. She simply played the footage. Loretta swapping the bottles. Loretta whispering. She doesn't need to know yet on the porch. Dr. Geller handing me paperwork with my name already written, the pen never having touched my hand. Next, Quinn submitted the analysis report of the pills. Then came the screenshots from the brunch. The voice recordings. The testimony from a 19-year-old who had been led to the clinic by an older friend of the family, Loretta. The judge didn't interrupt. He took notes, slow and deliberate. When Quinn finished, there was silence. Loretta's attorney objected, claimed fabrication, emotional bias, even a personal vendetta. But the evidence sat in front of the judge like stones on a scale. He denied the conservatorship. He issued a restraining order against Loretta effective immediately. He opened a motion for criminal investigation into Blessed Grove Wellness Center. Noah, who hadn't said a word since the hearing began, finally spoke barely above a whisper. I didn't know. I thought she just cared. I turned to him, calm and certain. Control is not care. He didn't follow me out of the courtroom. I didn't look back. Outside, Quinn handed me a copy of the ruling and I slipped it into my bag beside the file labeled Blueprints. I packed the last box myself. Just a few books, a sweater, the framed sketch from college I kept near my desk. Noah wasn't home. I'd asked him not to be. The silence of the house made it easier, less explaining, less apologizing for things I would never be sorry for. The divorce was uncontested. He didn't fight me on the house or the accounts. He said he understood. I didn't ask whether he meant it. I moved into a small loft across town. Exposed brick, too much light in the mornings, and just enough space to feel like mine. For the first few weeks, I barely unpacked. I just sat with the quiet, trying to remember what it felt like before someone else's expectations wrapped around my spine like wire. Work, surprisingly, stayed steady. My firm offered a temporary reprieve when everything blew up, then welcomed me back without fanfare. My name was still attached to the anonymous video despite precautions. A journalist pieced it together. The article was shared widely. Some called me brave. Others called me unstable. I stopped reading comments after the 3rd day. Old friends messaged people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some offered support. Some asked intrusive questions in the guise of concern. One woman from college wrote, "I always thought you'd have trouble letting go of control." I didn't reply. Months passed. The dust settled, but the air never cleared completely. I wasn't the same, and I didn't want to be. I started offering quiet help to advocacy groups, research grant writing, reviewing policy language for loopholes that allowed coercion to masquerade as care. No spotlight, no stage, just work that felt like building something real. Sometimes I walked past playgrounds and felt nothing. No ache, no longing, no shame. Just wind and wood chips and laughter I didn't need to make my own. I still dreamed of Loretta sometimes, of the brunch, the clinic, her voice saying my name like it was hers to shape. But I always woke up alone, free. And the silence finally was mine. Then one evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end of the line was small but steady. "Hi. Is this Soraya?" I paused unsure. "Yes." "Who's calling?" "It's Maris. I'm Noah's niece. Grandma says I'll make a beautiful mother someday. She bought me a journal. Like she gave you." My breath caught. She didn't cry, didn't stumble. But there was something in her voice I recognized too well, uncertainty trying to sound grown. She says I should start writing down baby names. She says it helps shape your destiny. I sat down slowly. "Has she done anything else?" A pause. She said next summer we might go on a trip. Just us girls. She said she wants to help me start early before school gets in the way. My fingers tightened around the phone. I didn't ask anything more. I didn't feed her fear or plant mine inside her. I just gave her a number one I used for situations that never made it to court but mattered all the same. "You can call me any time," I told her. "You don't have to explain. You don't have to prove anything." "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." We hung up quietly. I sat with the silence for a long time. Loretta hadn't started with me, and she hadn't stopped either. I had just been the one to say no loud enough for someone to hear. The next day, I emailed Quinn. We reopened the civil suit against the clinic now with more names attached. I agreed to speak on one panel a year, no more. I told my story once clean and spare. Then I stepped off the stage and disappeared again. I designed homes, private spaces, women's shelters, spaces with locks that couldn't be picked with family names or polite pressure, sanctuaries with doors that closed all the way. Occasionally I heard from Maris. Once she sent a picture of a science fair project. Another time a short poem she wrote in English class. Never about Loretta. Never about babies, just life blooming where she'd planted her own roots. I printed the poem and pinned it above my drafting table. She wanted to build a legacy through my womb. I built it with my mind, and that was the one place she couldn't reach.